I'd like to kind of give me just a minute. Let me sort of get my brain sufficiently lubricated toward what I want to say. And my apologies for my appearance, hair, etc. I'm just getting woke up and have been up journaling for the last hour or so. What I'd like to talk about is the difficulty of overcoming my past patterns, the behaviors. Well, let me just say first, the mental and emotional anxieties that really drove my life for as far back as I can recall, all the way back into my childhood. And as these things go, they sort of morph along with your life circumstances. But in my particular life experience, they have always been there, and for most of that time I did not possess either the knowledge or the skills or the awareness to actually address those things and find ways to refocus my attention, my energies, etc. I hope that doesn't sound too babblish. Oops, sorry about that. But those past mental and emotional hang-ups, if I can say it like that, use a rather euphemistic sort of a term, really begin to manifest in very acute and very serious ways into my late 40s, and then well into my 50s. I would say even well into my late 50s, to the point that there were many episodes that I had in which I contemplated self-harm. And it was one of the things that precluded, or it was one of the factors that brought me to a point where I felt that I had to rethink, to reconsider and reevaluate all of my belief mechanisms up to that point. And so consequently, a great number of things, a significant number of things were discarded on my part. I just let them go. One of the things that I have discovered about myself is that not only do I think that by nature, if you will, don't like that term very much, but by nature I am a skeptical contrarian. But another thing that I've discovered about myself is that for me, life must be pragmatic. Regardless of what my philosophies happen to be, my belief systems in other areas, political, social, philosophical. Did I already say that one? There has to be a very, very strong pragmatic component to those parts of me in order for me to see the value in what it is that I'm, believing or thinking. So all of those past habits and behaviors, hang-ups, anxieties, whatever you might call them, or whatever maybe however a professional might refer to them, they caught up to me and motivated me, I'll say it like that, to reevaluate my life. And during that whole time of change, behavioral changes that I began to go through, and when I say behavioral changes, I don't mean outward behaviors, because I wasn't an alcoholic, I wasn't a substance abuser, anything dramatic like that, or maybe anything acute like that. I didn't have obsessions or whatever the case may be. For me, the behavioral changes were around how I thought, how I attempted to regulate my emotional self. And so they were inward things. They were internal things that when I attempted to explain to people, I could tell it was most people, as far as I could tell, did not have a point of relationship. It did not have a point to relate to what I was talking about. So as I went through those, I began to go through that, and as I processed through that, I came out the other side, if you will. I make it sound like I reached a point. It wasn't that. Because it's such a fluid, ongoing process. You just keep going at it. It's like owning a vehicle, a car. If you want it to last, you've got to keep it well maintained, and that includes doing the same redundant things over and over, changing the oil and, getting it tuned up and putting on new tires, or whatever the analogy happens to be. But there's some redundant things that would never leave you. You just have to stay on top of it. It's or another analogy, just keeping your house clean, orderly. So anyway, on the other side of those procedural changes, those behavioral changes that I was having to figure out on my own through self-help videos online, things of that nature, to try to get my mind around certain concepts, psychological concepts. Some things began to become more clearer to me. Some of my more crude philosophies or crude ideas, like, I've said, I made a decision that I wanted to live. And I know that might sound maybe odd to people, but you have to understand that through my life, I had this background thought. I don't think it was real in a sense. I think it was an illusion, a delusion, a self-delusion, that I didn't care if I lived or died. I had that very cynical, catastrophizing, apocalyptic, self-loathing kind of a mentality that said, fuck it, I'm not worth it, life's not worth it. And so, but when I was 60 years old, and I don't know if I've mentioned this in other videos, but when I was 60 years old, I made a decision that one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to live for as long as possible, because I wanted to live in health. I wanted to attempt to achieve a couple of things. One was well-being in the sense of my physical, emotional, and mental health. I wanted to try to achieve that. I wanted to feel good about myself, and I wanted to feel good about my life. And so I've said, I don't want to die the way I've lived up to that point. And then the other thing that these are intertwined. You really can't separate these ideas. At least I can't separate them. I see them all as the same, sort of the same atomic structure, if you will, with a nuclei and electrons and other things all in this cloud of thought and energy. And that second thought was that I'll say it like this, I want to be in charge of my life. I want to be controlling my life. I don't want to feel like I'm a branch floating along in a turbulent river, even though in reality, if you want to have a philosophical debate about that, I'm more than happy to, because that may in fact be the reality. Free will is a funny subject in my opinion. Funny, not funny ha-ha, but funny strange. But maybe it can be funny ha-ha either way. But I wanted to have more of a sense of control as to the sense of who I am as a person, what I want out of life, how I want to feel about myself, how I want to feel about other people, how I want to feel about the reality of the existence in which I find myself. Now I know, and I'm just going to hit this real quick and move on, but I know the religious and the philosophical and maybe even the scientific debate over all of this kind of an idea. But again, I come back to my, I come back to my pragmatism. This is the only reality that I know of, that I have. I struggle with these ideas, especially from the religious, that there is an alternative reality that I must somehow manage. I'm sorry, but I've got my hands full with this. I do not possess sufficient intelligence or maybe emotional intelligence to manage an altogether different reality and to hold myself responsible for an invisible deity or force's demands upon my existence. I don't have that capacity. And it only complicates what I'm trying to do. And if I'm being perfectly honest, it doesn't help me make any better sense out of what this is, this situation. So in these changes that I've been going through, I've also come to the realization of how difficult all of this is for me, how difficult it has been for me to explore deep down inside. Not necessarily where it all came from. I've got a pretty good idea. I don't need to look very far into my past. Or no, I should say, I don't need to contemplate too deeply into my past that a lot of this stems, at least a significant portion of it stems from the dysfunctionality of the upbringing that I had that included so much violence and substance abuse and other such sad things. And then also just those repeated patterns that you just build on top, it's, you just keep building on top and on top and top of. It's just, well, as Pink Floyd said, another brick in the wall type of an analogy there. But it was not so much trying to figure out, well, this person did that and I responded in this way and this caused this childhood developmental anomaly or whatever. Yes, I recognize that those things are very, very invalid and they're very important. But again, back to my pragmatism, it was more about, okay, yeah, gosh, this is, in another 6 months, I'm going to be 70 years old. I don't really have the time, nor do I have the interest, nor do I have the memory capability of going back and straightening all that shit out. Instead, I've got maybe a decade. Gosh, if I get super duper lucky, a decade and a half left. I don't have time for too much energy being spent on the past unless I can directly correlate a past issue with a current behavior that helps me quickly untie that Gordian knot. I'll say it like that. So for me right now, it just really becomes about the present, the moment. This is me right now. This is what I have to work with. I like to say it like this when it comes to what I have to work with. Look, I don't think that I'm the most intelligent, gregarious, handsome, dynamic person in the world. But who am I to disagree with so many? You know what I'm saying? One of my old jokes. I think it's plagiarized, by the way. But yeah, this is what I've got to work with. This is the limited time in which I've got to work. And I have to say that I'm very, very intent on, I don't like the word change. I talked to my therapist about this a few months back. There's a few words that I don't care for. I don't find them pragmatically sufficient. I don't like the word change. And I don't like the word forgiveness. I won't go there. I just don't find them sufficient concepts. Change has been, the term itself, the word itself, is too consumerized. It's been too, it's been overly used. One of the phrases that I just have such a difficulty hearing every time I hear it, this will change your life. I struggle with that. What I replace the concept, or at least the colloquial concept of change, what I supplant it with or change, or what I use instead, is the idea of self-management. My personality, I don't think my personality can change. I don't think that is a part of, in order for me to be authentic, this is who I am. I don't know how to be anything else. I spent sufficient number of years trying to be like other people in terms of personality, and just a little FYI, a bonus note here, it doesn't work. That is inauthenticity in its worst. But but this concept rather of self-management, I I believe in incrementalism. How's that? The idea that you just little by little, step by step, moment by moment, knowing that you'll relapse, knowing that you'll forget what you're trying to do in the middle of a situation, and you'll fall back on old patterns and those kind of things, but you incrementally adjust, you tinker. I see the universe, the physical reality in which I live, which we all exist, I believe, as a process of tinkering over, at least in our case, in the observable presentation of the universe, 13.8 billion years, or 13.72, or whatever the exact figure is, as 13.8 billion years of tinkering. 4.5 of those billion have been on this planet. 500 million have been in mammalian species evolution. The last couple of 100,000 years of the specific Homo sapiens species, it's a tinkering process that just keeps on going. And that's how I like to approach this idea of, quote unquote, change. So rather than thinking, oh, I don't know how long I'm going. I don't really want this to go too long, but when I became an evangelical when I was 19 years old, one of the Bible verses that was sort of emphasized for me at that time in the evangelical groups, the circles that I was in, was that, and I forget the exact address of it, 1 Corinthians 5:17, 2 Corinthians 5:20, something like that. If any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. Behold, all things have become new. I'm butchering it. Behold, all things, the old is passed away, and ta-da, the new is here. You get this instantaneous, overnight conversional change where you were this, now you are this. And that held up for a few weeks or months before, even though I wasn't really honest with myself back in those days, I realized, okay, it's not exactly how life works. So instead, I have adapted in my life, adopted to adapting. I've taken on this this mantra, if you will, of embracing and utilizing incrementalism, incremental adjustments to all of these things. Suppose you had a yard that you want to put in a garden, and the weeds, they were everywhere. The ground was hard, the weeds were thick, but you wanted to, you could take on the whole project over the weekend or maybe over the couple of weeks and, plow everything, which is how you're supposed to do it. Or you could just cut out a little patch in the corner and start working it. And over time, you could increase that little garden to consume a significantly larger portion of the yard than the weeds. Incrementalism is my concept there. So anyway, I just wanted to talk about that because I have some things on my mind that I haven't shared, and I don't want to in social media, in a video content, because they're personal and they have to do with people that I know and love and care about. But change has been difficult. It has taken a considerable amount of focus and attention and effort and work and coming to terms with a lot of things in my life. And but it's I think it works. I think it's working for me, pragmatically speaking. I think I'm going to stop right there. I could keep belaboring this point, but then it would make the video unwatchable. But anyway, those are my thoughts for this morning. As always, it's my hope that you are well, that you are on a path of self-discovery. Boy, that's another topic. I love self-discovery. But that you are on a healthy path, finding your way through this complexity. And as always, take care of yourself. No matter how the river bends, no matter what waterfalls or rapids you encounter, self-care will benefit you. Have a great day.